here's Brodie Brazil.
Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're talking about special use airspace, which usually appears in big chunks on your sectional chart or your terminal chart, and sometimes your flight path and what's most efficient, point A to point B, it might take you across one of these areas. Do you know what they mean? Can you enter them? What should you be aware of regarding special use airspace? This is important, and this one kind of slips through the cracks with a lot of private pilots, and so I want to go over it here. 4 types of airspace in total: controlled, right, like class B, C, D; uncontrolled, special use airspace, or some other rare situations. Quite honestly, most everything can be defined through those first 3. But specifically when it comes to special use airspace, it's airspace where activities must be confined to these places due to their nature, these activities, or wherein limitations are imposed on aircraft that are not part of those activities, or both. To sum up that paragraph, we're trying to keep airplanes in this box to keep them safe from outside airplanes, or we're trying to keep outside airplanes outside this box to make sure that everything and everybody inside goes as planned. So it's literally the separation, the designation of an area, and the separation of aircraft either inside or outside on purpose for safety's sake and security's sake. Now, in terms of identification, these are all graphically depicted on charts. They're usually blue or magenta areas with a lot of those little tick marks on solid, thick lines. I'll show you the different examples on your screen in just a second, but they obviously appear on the chart. They also come with textual information, including the altitude of this airspace. Some of them go down to the surface. Others are high up in the air. They're big chunks. And on a chart view, it seems like all that airspace would be off limits to you. But in reality, it's way higher up than you'll ever need or be flying through. So altitude's important. Time of day or night or days of the week. They're not always active. You should know that. I mean, just because it appears there once doesn't mean it's always going to be a factor for your flight. The agency that's responsible for its use, and also the radio frequency you can contact for either clearance or information through that airspace. Okay, let's begin with prohibited. And just like it sounds, there's no flight allowed in prohibited airspace. P40, I believe, is Camp David out near in Maryland. No flight allowed unless you have prior authorization granted. Let me give you a hint on this. You'll never have authorization granted. They throw in that caveat, but yeah, you're not going into a P airspace. There's not that many of them. So there's P40. This has been established for security and welfare. When you see prohibited, literally, as my hockey friends like to say, no chance, bud. You're not going through prohibited airspace. And actually, I believe, yeah, that prohibited airspace is inside a chunk of restricted airspace. So the P and the R do have meaning, right? And that's how you look up the textual information. You look up like P40 or R2524 or R2502 November. Here's restricted airspace. It's blue. It's tick marks on both sides, not just the inside like prohibited. It's on both sides. That's the graphical depiction. Not wholly prohibited, but restricted and risky. So what does that mean? Yeah, it's not a good idea to enter restricted airspace without authorization. When active, airborne hazards are expected. So you might want to talk to the local air traffic controller, whether it's center or whether it's approach, the Air Route Traffic Control Center, or your TRACON. Just stay out of restricted airspace, right? I mean, unless you know what's going on and unless you're talking to the controller, and a lot of this is why flight following is just so beneficial. You're getting the updated information, you're getting affirmation, you're being watched through here. Restricted airspace, it's right below prohibited. It's possible to journey through there, but certainly not recommended without prior indication or knowledge. Warning areas. You'll see these off the coast. They are defined dimensions from 3 nautical miles outwards of the coast of the continental United States. Now, the FAA just has no control over these international waters, so there may be hazardous activity. They just can't assure you of anything. And kind of with the theme, right? Prohibited, restricted, a little bit less. Warning is just, hey, we're just warning you here. And then that brings us to an alert area. You could fly through an alert area, no problem. It's just depicted on charts in magenta with the tick marks only facing in to warn of high training activity, either in flight volume or in the nature of it. It says right there, alert area, Alpha 291 Charlie, concentrated flight training. This is somewhere, I think, west of Miami. I don't even know where this is at. But it's the point that it's nice to have on the chart. If you're just looking to joyride and you want a little bit less of a busy trafficked flight, stay away from these alert areas designated on the chart. There's also one more to tell you about, a MOA, a military operation area. These are places that separate military activity from IFR flights. You'll see a lot of MOAs in the West, and they all have names rather than a numerical designation. But the terminology is hot or cold. Is the MOA hot or cold right now, or today, or later today? And when you're talking to a briefer, when you're talking to an air traffic controller, is the Reno MOA hot or cold right now? And knowing that, you can fly through it safely and confidently if you know it's cold. If it's hot, you better stay away. Military operation area. Again, there's a lot of those big chunks of airspace. It's something to know about. I also want to point out here, though, airspace in terms of rules versus airspace in terms of safety. Airspace is not a brick wall in the sky. Now, I'm not telling you to fly into prohibited airspace. Please don't do that. But just understand that if your choices are fly into the airspace and save yourself, save a life, do something noble or valuable, versus risk it because you didn't want to fly in and you didn't want to have to explain yourself. If life depends on entering airspace without clearance, and this goes for Bravo too, if life depends on it, there will be time to explain yourself later. And the FAA and other entities of government, they might come a-knocking. But if you can explain it as the pilot in command, I just want you to understand, don't look at airspace as a brick wall like it's impossible to penetrate. If you have to and you have no other choice, do it. Now, I understand there's not a lot of things that would provoke this or be reasons why you should do this. But if that ever does present itself, know that airspace is not a brick wall. All right, that's special use airspace. And again, a lot of times you might be flying along and looking at your magenta line and realizing, whoa, I didn't realize that or think about this earlier, but here's how you sort through it. Here's how to know what is on that chart. I highly recommend that you get familiar with the different types and understand the limitations. Thanks for watching this video. Thumbs up if it provided you value, and also consider subscribing to this channel. If you like this content, I've got lots more coming your way.